Oh, the handheld?
Yep, they're all the same.
Test. Okay. I don't know if it works. It works. Okay, thank you for coming. We are just about ready to get started with training, but I'll just cover a couple preliminaries first. So hopefully when you walked in, you picked up one of these packets. If you have not picked up one of these packets, please see Janine by the door. Also, this training is being recorded. If there are members of your department who are unable to attend, we'll be sending out links to the training, and it will be available on the Employee Insider as well for later viewing, or if you need to have a refresh. Because we're recording the training, if you have questions, I will recognize you, and then Janine is walking around with a handheld mic, so she'll bring you the mic so that your question will be recorded. Otherwise, we won't know what you asked. If we do get questions that don't get caught on the mic, I'll try and repeat the questions just so that whoever's viewing the video can have the full context. So we structured this training to kind of start with all users and the largest group of users that would be utilizing OnBase, and then we'll kind of funnel down to later users who are, so from 2 to 2:30, it's everyone that will be using OnBase for council-related activities. And then from 2:30 to 3, it will be the finance and legal department staff, as well as any departments that have assistant directors or a division director, and all the directors as well. And then for the last half hour, it will be the council staff, mayor's office staff, and Amanda and Brian Jones and myself. So if you have questions, feel free. Amanda and I have both listed our contact information on the front of your packet. We are really familiar with this program, and we're happy to help you. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have additional questions. So many of you are familiar with Sire. Some of you may be less familiar with Sire, but OnBase is, there's a couple of different programs that constitute OnBase. For users of CityView, you are using OnBase already as a document management software. So the topics we'll be covering today primarily relate to the council agenda management system that is being provided to us by OnBase. So if you open your packet, just on the first page on the left, we have a copy of how the workflow functions. And it just looks like a lot of messy arrows, but as we go through the training, you'll get a sense for kind of how that functions and what that looks like. So just a reminder, as you came in, hopefully you picked up a packet. Please sign in on the sheet in the back. There's a couple of reasons for that. We'd like to have a record of who's in attendance. We also have included a column for you to write your Active Directory or City Computer login username. Just your username, don't tell us your password. The reason for that is Spencer will be showing us momentarily how to install the software, and when you open the software for the first time, you'll the system will automatically generate a user account. However, in order for the workflow to function properly for your specific user role in your specific department, Amanda and I need to go in and configure what groups you're in. So for most of you, that's what department you're in. For some of the groups, it's like if they're a director, we need to put them in a director group and those kinds of things. So please be sure to include your username on that login so that we can make sure to assign you to the right groups so that everything you're being shown today will actually work. Okay, so with that, just one other thing I'll mention on the slides that were going up when you came in. So yesterday was the last set of council meetings that we are using Sire to complete agendas for. So going forward, we'll be using OnBase exclusively. Sire is still live through the end of next week. So after November 5th, don't use Sire. It won't work for council agendas. It will still function for some of the other departments like HR and for submitting P-card approvals. But for council agendas, after November 5th, we will exclusively be using OnBase. Okay, so I'll turn the time over to Spencer. He's going to just go over a couple of things on how to install the software, and then we will walk you through the process of submitting an agenda item.
All right, so the tool that we'll be using to install this program is called Portal Manager. Show of hands, how many of you have used Portal Manager before? Quite a few of you, good. Okay, so we're just going to walk through how to use it, what it is, what it does, etc. So you'll find Portal Manager. All of you should have this installed on your Windows desktop. It's just this black circle thing. It says Portal Manager. Just go ahead and double click that. So we'll open up to this. Now, this should be your starting page right here. One little caveat that I want to make you aware of, because we've had a lot of people that have run to a different type of screen and they get a little bit confused because they're not sure what where they're supposed to go from there. So Amanda, if you could just click on the menu from the top left corner and then just go to Task History. Sometimes your Portal Manager may open to this. Have any of you seen this screen before when you've opened Portal Manager? Okay. So just in case it does open to this, just so you know what this is, this just simply shows you things that your computer has already installed or tasks that it's already run. So to switch back to that, we'll just go back up to that menu again and go to Launchpad. That's what we're looking for. So Launchpad, on here you can see there's several different icons. Some of these are installation packages. Some of them are web links. We might actually have a filter set on this, so it's only showing installation packages. But essentially what these are all applications that we've approved for use in our environment. A lot of them are freeware applications that you can download off the internet. If you don't have admin permissions on your machine, you won't be able to install those unless you do it through Portal Manager. The nice thing about this is it lets you install any one of these programs regardless if you have the right privileges or not. So that's what makes this tool really handy. But it also has some of our Provo specific applications such as OnBase on here. So what you'll do to install something is you just go to what you're looking for. We're going to install OnBase Agenda Manager, and you can either click that install link, you can double click it, go ahead and click that. So when you do that, this little pop-up thing in the top right corner will appear, and it'll just simply show you your progress. So at first it'll start with the download. Oh, looks like it failed. And then, so it should go through and install it for you. I'll have to check out why that's happening. Oh, that's right. Yes, we wanted to point that out. Okay, the refresh. Thank you. I wanted to make you guys aware of this. So this button, the refresh button up in the top right corner, is really important. Go ahead and click it again. So that should work. What had happened was actually right before this meeting, I did a couple of changes on that installation. So your computers will refresh this automatically on, I think, a 24-hour cycle. Regardless whether you have this open or not, it'll just update. What I would recommend as a best practice when you open this, if you're going to install something, it's best just to hit that refresh button just to make sure, because occasionally I go on and make changes. I may add a program, I may update something. There's programs on here that get updated fairly frequently. Java is one of those, Chrome as well. So you want to make sure that you always have the latest. So just go ahead and click that refresh button. That'll make sure you have the latest. And we can see here that it's actually working now. Does anybody have any questions on that so far, or any questions about how you use Portal Manager? Okay, so it says successfully installed, that goes away, and then it will create a desktop shortcut for you. That was one of the new features we just added, that I just added to this a couple days ago, I believe, to where it actually sets up a desktop shortcut for you so that you can just see it right there. So anyway, that's how to install. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Spencer. Okay, so once you have installed OnBase Agenda, you'll want to open up the program. The first time you open it, it will create your user account. So if you run into any issues, you might need to close out of it and then reopen it. But at that point, if you're running into any issues, please contact Amanda or myself. So I will let Amanda open this. Yeah, this is just for training purposes. So when you install Agenda, it will be configured with automatic login so that it will just open up right to your username. For the purposes of training, we're going to be logging in and out of all the test accounts for each step of the workflow, so we have to disable that so we can actually show you how it works. Yes, Cliff. So Cliff wondered if we need to wait to install. You can go ahead and install it. As Spencer mentioned, you'll just want to make sure to hit refresh as there were some changes that were still being put in place on the application this morning. But we would love for you to leave this training and try installing it right away so we can work out any issues well in advance. John? Yes, so when you download the program, he asked if it'll use your network password to get in. It will be configured with the Active Directory, so it will just log you in with your same city username and password. But if for some reason the Active Directory isn't working, it'll just be those same login credentials. Okay, so once you're in, you'll see a screen that looks exactly like this. The list of meetings at the lower right might be a little bit different based on when we get meetings entered in. But to enter an item, so in your packet you can follow along, we're going to start at the submitter step. So there are two meeting types listed on the left, council meeting and work session. You have to click the arrow to the left of the meeting type to expand the agenda item entry, and then click on agenda item, and that will open up the form where you can submit an item. So in the past, we had a council memo template on the citywide drive that we asked departments to use, and we kind of had some inconsistent results with that, but we've tried to make it a lot simpler in putting in the information that we need in the council office right in the submission form. So the first thing I'll draw your attention to is that you must select a target meeting date. So that's just to kind of help us get a sense of when you'd like an item to come forward. That's not a guarantee, but you'll select a target meeting date in that drop-down menu, and then go through the rest of the form. So Amanda, if you want to just scroll through, so it asks for a title, the recommendation or the action requested, background information, so maybe the context around the item, or if maybe it's an item that came to council 6 months ago and it's coming back, an explanation of maybe what's going on and why it's coming back. And then if it's time sensitive, yes or no, and if you have additional details, you're welcome to enter those in another field where our staff can see that. And then the presenter's name, the requested duration of your presentation, and then there are a few fields at the end, compatibility with general plan and some of the other cities' guiding documents, as well as a city view or issue file number, which will primarily be used by community development and the council staff. So if you have questions about any of those fields, feel free to let us know. Once you enter all of those in, you'll want to click Save at the top left. And so once you click Save, you will be able to add documents to your agenda item and go from there. So to create a memo from the information you've just entered in onto this form, at the top you will click on Add from Template and select Agenda Item Memo. And when you do so, OnBase has an integration with Microsoft Word, and so we've preloaded the templates for these various documents, and so when you click to add that document, the system will generate a document based on what you've entered into the form. For instance, say you had a presenter who you were planning on, but then maybe a few weeks later you find it's going to be someone different. You're welcome to go into these items and you can update the presenter and update the form, and that is helpful as it kind of allows all of us to see that information. So many times, departments, you might have a draft of an ordinance or resolution, or you might have a staff report or some other document that you'd like to include with your agenda item submission. So Amanda's closing out of this memo. There's an optional comment form where you can choose to enter a comment. If you are making updates, say, to a memo that you created earlier, this is a helpful place where you can say, oh, the presenter has been updated, or some other information to communicate. Okay, so then once you close out of that, if you go over to Add from File, you'll want to select either Supporting Document, or if you have a document that is a draft of an ordinance or resolution, you'll choose the appropriate type. But for the most part, the supporting documents is going to be your catch-all. Okay, so this is going on to the next page if you're following along and jotting in notes. So Amanda is demonstrating here. It's basically like any file upload feature where you can navigate to the browser folder and then open the document. And if you look down here at the bottom, you'll see where this is the memo that was created earlier, and then you have these various document types that have been added. For CityView users, many of your documents exist in the OnBase document repository, so there's an additional option where you can add from OnBase, and you can navigate to the appropriate folder where your planning or other project files might be located. Okay, so once all of your supporting documents have been added, you'll want to click Save again. And that error will probably not happen to you. Once you click Save, okay, we're re-uploading the documents. Yes. So you can remove supporting documents by clicking on this minus sign. And Amanda, this does not delete the document from the OnBase document cabinet?
No, it doesn't. It actually just removes it from the agenda item. So if you had already uploaded it, it would still be in OnBase. But because these are just on the item, they haven't been uploaded, I'm just removing the association.
Okay, thank you. So I guess just make sure you're uploading what you intend to upload, and then it will confirm whether or not you want to remove those documents. Okay, so we'll try that again quickly. While we're waiting for those to be uploaded, does anyone have any questions? Dan?
So I typically run into a situation where the item that I need is for a council meeting, but the council likes to listen to hear that in a work session. So what should I pick? A work session or a council?
Okay, that's a great question. So if there's an item that you know is anticipated to come to a council meeting, but typically the council likes to have a work meeting discussion, which form do you use? You're welcome in those instances, because it might be a case-by-case basis where it might vary depending on the department. Feel free to call us if you have questions about your specific item, because I can see where redevelopment, it might be a different answer than for community development, where we know that a planning commission item requires a legislative action. So when in doubt, feel free to just enter it as a work meeting, and you can put a note in there that or I guess if you have an anticipated council meeting date, that's what the target meeting date is for. So I guess whichever one has a hard deadline, but you can, I mean, it's kind of We were discussing this yesterday, and there's not really a clear answer for that, Cliff.
Can we program it? Can we have the developers program it toggle to say both?
So Cliff asked whether we can have the developers program in a toggle. So in those instances, I would just say enter it as one and indicate that you are anticipating a meeting discussion of the other meeting, and our staff, we can easily copy the item to both meetings. So that's the easy answer, just pick one, but feel free to contact us if you're not sure. Okay, so once those documents are uploaded, click Save again, and then you'll see at the, it's not showing up. Agenda item tasks. So typically, once you click Save, if you look at their screenshot here, step 7, you'll see a toolbar that says Agenda Item Tasks. And we will try it again. This is likely due to the fact that we've had to install and then remove this program to show you how to be able to install it, and with our different test users, we're running into some hiccups. Yeah, John?
One of these might go without saying, but in Sire, when you submitted something to an agenda item, you would actually specify which department you were from. But I assume right now it just knows who you are and just assumes that it's going to be in the department where you reside.
Yes, so John was asking, in Sire, there was a form or a field where you'd specify what department you're from. Because we will configure you into different department user groups, the system is automatically, it will know who is submitting the item and what department you represent. Okay, so that worked. Yes, Brian?
So there's been occasions in the past where legal's been working with another department to come up with a draft, and because they haven't known how to submit stuff inside, we've done it for them. That's selected their department when we submit it. I'm assuming based on what you just said, with John, in this case, if Gary's doing something for parks, he needs to tell, when he's done with it, he needs to tell parks, you need to submit it.
Yes, that's a great question. So yes, the intent here is that every department will submit their own items. There is a feature where, say you have an item that you're submitting, but you're still working with legal on getting it to a state where it's ready to be reviewed by the council. You can add an additional reviewer, and that's a good opportunity where you can use that additional reviewer function to kind of work out some of those preliminary issues before you send the item on its way to be reviewed. Okay, so once you have uploaded your documents successfully, you'll have access to this toolbar, Agenda Item Tasks. So that toolbar will appear for anyone who has an item that's ready to go to the next step, essentially. But depending on the user, the specific tasks that you will see may vary a little bit. And we'll kind of touch on that more as we go on to the mid-level reviewer and director approver and finance and legal. So the options here, so this is, Amanda, who's the test user? Okay, so we're using Kari as an example. So Kari in Parks and Recreation has created this agenda item, and she would like to submit it for approval. So she goes to Agenda Item Tasks, and Amanda just pulled up a screen where we have a table of all the departments that have a mid-level reviewer. So just take a quick look up here for your department, and you can see this short list right here of all the mid-level approvers. So you may not see that option, and that just simply means that your item will go directly to your department director, which is often the case for a smaller department or a department without multiple divisions and functions. So back in Agenda, so if that is the option that's available to you, you'll select Send to Mid-Level Approver. If you do not have a mid-level in your department, you'll send it to the department head for approval. And then over here, this third option, this is the Send to Additional Reviewer option that I referenced. So if you want to have legal take a look at something before you submit it, that's a good place to do so. And then you'll also see, I'll just really quick mention, and Amanda's just showing us the additional reviewer selection. You'll also see this return to previous queue. So where, in our example, Kari is the first person to ever touch this agenda item, so there will be no previous queue. But after any initial action is done and it goes to someone else in the workflow, that item will simply return it to the previous queue. So if legal reviews it, they can say, send to previous queue. It will send it back to Kari. Kari can review it for completion and then send on to her mid-level reviewer. Okay, so one other thing we wanted to note here is back in the main agenda, if you close out of the agenda item, this item has not been submitted yet, so if, I'm trying to think where the discussions show up right here. Okay. So there's another feature which is helpful for some of those back and forth reviews where you can do discussions. So once you open an agenda item, we're waiting for that to happen. Okay, while we're waiting for that to unfreeze, does anyone have any questions about the initial agenda item entry and submitting and how that goes? Okay, so we're back. So if you look at the top, so we were just looking at agenda item tasks. Over here is agenda item, and then we have this discussions button here. That's a great way, if you have some of those kinds of conversations, you can keep a thread with that discussion right in the item itself. So you would want to click that discussions button, and then you can start a discussion and put a title, maybe, does this item look okay? Doug, is this what you wanted? Then you can subscribe or unsubscribe to email notifications, and then you can submit the discussion. So that's also a great way for continuity when you have, maybe you have multiple staff members who might be checking on the status of an item. That can help keep everyone on the same page. Okay, so now, I guess, Amanda, you can probably send that to mid-level, and then I'll just show a couple other things that everyone would like to know. Yeah, Kari. He'll have to log into OnBase, and so that's, he will get a notification. Once you hit send to mid-level approval, it will go to Doug Robbins in your case, and he will get a notification that that item is ready for his review. And when he opens the item, he can click on discussions, and he'll see over on the side that there is a discussion going. And then he'll have to activate those notifications. Great question. Chief Miguel?
Lower level conversation where we just talked about wanting to send something maybe to legal to have them look at it before it goes through the official process. Do you have to aim it at somebody? Do I have to say this is for Brian, or do I just, and then if I do say this is for Brian, how is he notified that there's something for him to review?
So Amanda just went back in here and well, she's just creating another test item so we can show you how that works. So if your department has specific if there's a specific legal staff member that works primarily with your department, when it goes to the legal approval step, which happens after finance and after the director or department head, that is configured so that any of your legal items go to the attorney who works with your department. But if it's one of those cases of an additional reviewer, once you click send to additional reviewer, this dialog box appears, and then you can select an ownership group. So you'll select, okay, so you want to send it to someone in legal, and then you'll select the user. And not all the users are set up in these groups yet because you're all here right now, and we will add you to the groups after this training. Okay, so a couple other features And then we're about done here. If you go to the next page, there are two sections. So this is on page 5, agenda item search and revision control. So those are some features that will be useful to all of you throughout various points of using OnBase. So let's say, for example, Kari has submitted her item 2 weeks ago. She doesn't know where it's at. She hasn't heard anything since. So she wants to find out what's happening with that item. So the easiest way to do that is to go to this agenda item search bar, which is just on the main screen in OnBase Agenda at the bottom left. So that will pull up a panel of agenda items that are in the system. And typically, this is, we just have 6 items right now, but that will soon be many more items. So the best thing to do is to use this item title field and to search for your item. Of note is that the search field, it is only effective if you place an asterisk before and after your search terms. So we've highlighted that in yellow so that you can remember to do that. So once you've searched, you can also use the other fields to narrow the item to a specific date range. If you know who submitted the item, you can choose that in the submitter field. So there's basically all these different features. And then say there's a lot of results, you can further organize those results by expanding the selection, and then you can drag, say you want to organize it by meeting name. You can drag any of these up into the top bar, and then it'll kind of give you these subcategories. So you can experiment with that and see what your preference is as you're looking for items. Another great feature of OnBase Agenda, because it has the built-in integration with Microsoft Word, it makes revision control really simple. So often, I know in our department, we often have lots of versions of a document going around by email, and so it can sometimes be difficult to keep up with the latest draft or the latest version and what those changes were. Amanda's going to open up an item, and we can show you some of those revision controls that are built into the program. Okay, so if you go down to your items at the bottom of your agenda item, or I guess the documents, you can click on this magnifying glass to open up any of the documents. So this document has so far not had any revisions, but Amanda is making a revision right now, and then we will show you what that does. Okay, so Amanda has just updated the title and the duration of the presentation, and then she has saved the item by clicking on this save icon right here. She's added a note of what she has changed, and then you'll see this little revision indication now shows up. When you click on that revisions button, you can view here all the revisions of a document. If you scroll over, you can see who added these, who made the revision, their comments. If you scroll back over, it will be time-stamped, and you can see what file type it is. And then you can compare by selecting any versions of a document and then clicking this compare button. And for this feature to work, you have to have Microsoft Word installed on the computer. I think actually for the Microsoft Word, for the Microsoft Word synchronization to work in OnBase, you have to have it installed, but this actually opens up outside of OnBase, and so you'll see a document here, and then kind of your 2 versions alongside with some comments about what the differences are. So that makes it really nice when you have a lengthy document and you're comparing some minute differences. And then you can just exit out of that. You can choose to revert to a previous version of a document. If you click Save, changes will be saved as a new document. So then it will show in your revisions panel. So this is the one I want to use. And so then when you go back to revisions, it'll show, maybe it will show the update. It might take a minute. There might be a little bit of a lag, but basically that's the gist of how the revision function works. Yes, Brian?
So, current practice, a lot of times when stuff comes over to legal, is we mark it up and track changes and send it back. Under this system, do we need to not do that and prepare only clean versions? And they can see the changes by doing what you just said? Or what happens if we save something that's still in track changes?
So I think what you can do is you can utilize track changes within this OnBase function, and so that might be a way of making it simple for, and then the version you save will be the version with track changes activated. So
And then when we send it back, they can go through and
they can view the changes and accept the changes and save that as a new version. Cliff?
Similar to his, so these changes and track changes and that, is that only in the staff report or is that any document that's attached?
So Cliff is wondering if the revisions and track changes, is that only in the staff report or any document that is attached? You can use the revision feature in any document that is attached to an agenda item. And so Amanda just used this document as an example when maybe as the item's going through the initial review, maybe the department director has some more updated information and is updating that. But this can apply to an ordinance or any other document type that you would have in there. Okay, does anyone have any questions? I'll answer your questions, but that's basically the conclusion of our first section. So Jimmy had a question, and then I'll go to Josh.
To ask about something that's being rejected, sent back to the user,
Yeah, so Jimmy's wondering if something gets rejected or another change makes, does that get sent back to the additional review or to the previous user? So the revision control, that's where you will want to follow up by using these agenda item tasks. So you'll want to choose the task appropriate to whatever outcome you want. So say Brian Jones is reviewing a document from Parks and Recreation. He's added his track changes and saved that revision. He can send it back to the previous queue to send it back to Parks and Recreation. Or he may choose to utilize this send to additional reviewer. Say there's another user who isn't associated with this agenda item workflow that you'd like to review. So those are kind of the two best options for sending it back. And then you can send it forward using the other options available to you. Does that answer your question? Okay. And then Josh. So other document types are acceptable, yeah. Excel, what was that? I have not experimented too much with revision history on Excel files, but presumably it would work in a similar manner. Track changes, I don't think would work quite the same way because Excel has different functionality there. But there's multiple different file types that are accepted, pretty much the standard PDF, PowerPoint, Word, Excel. So those revision controls are available with any file type. So maybe you had to remove a PowerPoint slide or update something in the PowerPoint slide. It would kind of function in a similar manner. Okay, so if there are no other questions, we will excuse any of the submitter level users, and then we will keep the group that is staying is basically any division directors or assistant directors, department heads, finance, legal, and council staff. Okay. Oh, Amanda is demonstrating the revision control on an Excel sheet. So now you know that it works. Okay, so the next section of your instructions have a little bit different format that I just want to briefly explain so you don't get overwhelmed. So from the mid-level reviewer and on to the end, each page basically pertains to one specific user in the process. And on each page, there's kind of two sections, two horizontal sections, and that basically gives you two ways of doing the same thing. So we're going to demonstrate a couple steps using the agenda client, which we've been showing you, and then there's another program called OnBase Unity. And Amanda and I have felt in our testing and experimentation that feature or that program is a lot, it seems to work better for the workflow approval. And so we just wanted to demonstrate in both settings and give you instructions so that you can choose which way you're most comfortable with and what best meets your needs. Okay, so Amanda had submitted Kari's item to the mid-level reviewer, which in this case is Doug Robbins. And so now she has opened up the item, or when she logs in as Doug, any item that's available in this user's queue will show up here. And Amanda, if you want to go back to that screen really quick. Okay. So if you look back at that screen, it's showing the status is mid-level review, the queue name is mid-level reviewer. So that basically indicates that it's arrived, it's ready for Doug to complete his review. And then you can double click on that item to open it. And then all of the same functionality that we've just demonstrated. She's just demonstrating the revisions. And if you look there, that's showing that the document has 3 revisions. So it did just take a minute for that revision to stick. And then she's gone over to these discussions over here. And then this is where you can reply to a thread and subscribe or unsubscribe to email notifications. And then that will appear in the list here. And that will show up once you hit this discussions button. Okay, so Doug will perform his cursory review, make any updates or if things look good, and then save the item, and then go up to agenda item tasks. And similar to our last step, there are several items there, or several next steps. So you can return the item to the submitter. You can send it to the department head and then send to an additional reviewer or return to previous queue. And so a couple of those are options for every step of the process, but some of them are specific to what queue it's in now. Yes, John? Doug is not at this exact moment because we have those deactivated, but before we go live, we'll be activating the notification systems and the mail server that sends those, so he will get a notification that this item's available. That's the idea. We're still working on formatting that and testing it to make sure that it works as desired so that we're not just giving you a non-functioning link, but that's our hope, is that it will be just as simple as following the link to open the application. And Amanda has a comment for us.
Okay, the microphone's dead, so I'll yell at it. You can repeat it. To add to that, there is a web version of this available. Elizabeth and I didn't love it. It's kind of bland. We definitely prefer the client and recommend you use the client, but if you're on the go, you're welcome to use the web.
Yeah, so Amanda was just mentioning there is a web portal available. As we did testing, we preferred the use of the software on your computer, but if you're on the go or if the web client is a better fit for a mobile device or something, that's definitely an option and we can help you get set up with that. Okay, any questions on this step? So for the mid-level reviewer and department head reviewer, just during this training, I'm going to cover how to do that in agenda management. And then once we get to finance, I'm going to switch over and show you how to do the same type of process in Unity. So again, these directions are kind of split into 2 options, 2 ways to do the same thing. And we'll demonstrate both ways to you. So Doug will send this to department head and then close out of the item. And then Amanda's just logging out as Doug and logging in as our next user. Okay, so once Scott Henderson logs in, this is what he'll see. And again, you'll see the status and queue name have updated to say department review. And the process works much the same. You can double click to open the item. Once you've opened the item, you can view, edit, add revisions. You can add an additional document if needed. You can remove a document. And then you have the same type of functionality to participate in discussions and to advance an item to the next step in the workflow. And so the next step after the department head is to send to finance, and then you see those additional options that are kind of the same for every step. Okay, so now's when we're going to switch over to the other client, OnBase Unity. Spencer demonstrated how to use the portal manager at the beginning. OnBase Unity is available in the portal manager alongside OnBase Agenda. So feel free to download and install both and experiment. You cannot add an agenda item from Unity, but if you're reviewing an agenda item in the middle of the workflow, it's a great alternative. So for finance, we'll switch over to OnBase Unity, and the role of that application is basically document. It's the document repository or the document central for OnBase. And this utilizes the same username and login as your city account and as OnBase Agenda. Once you log into Unity, the first time you log in, you'll see a screen much like this, where there's just some information about OnBase and some of their online resources. What you'll want to go to is click on this workflow button right here. And Amanda is demonstrating there's a change layout button that she just clicked, and you can choose, you can make this my homepage. So say you know that every time you log in, you just want to see your workflow. You can make that the default pretty easily there. And then on the workflow tab, you can change the layout, basically where these three windows, the configuration of those windows and how it appears. So this large window here, this is where documents will appear. We're just viewing the item right now, so no documents are showing up. So you'll go into that workflow view, and then you'll see the items that are available for your review here in your inbox. And then at the top, you basically have the same set of options for agenda item tasks. So for finance, their next step is to send it to legal, or they can return to the submitter to an additional reviewer or the previous queue. Does anyone have any questions as we're looking at OnBase Unity for the first time? Okay. Oh, John?
So, for example, finance is reviewing it, or when the director is reviewing it, or the division director, do you actually click an approve button, or do you just, by forwarding on to the next person, just
So that's a great question. So John asked whether, is there an actual place where you click an approve button, or by forwarding it on to the next step in the process, does that assume that you've approved the item? That's a great question. So ultimately, the item is considered approved when the council office, which is the last step in the workflow, when the council office approves the item and places it on an agenda. So before that, there's no formal approval process, but that's where you might use some of those discussions and revisions and comments, some of those features maybe to document kind of where things are at in the process, maybe some items that are still being finalized. But basically, by passing it on, either you're anticipating the review of the next person in the step, or you've completed your review, and so you're ready to just send it on. Cliff?
Something I'm not clear about. So if John Morgan is acting as submitter, and he submits something, but then when he acts as a reviewer, does he actually have to switch between the agenda program and the Unity program?
That's a great question. So Cliff asked, so say John Borgett is entering an item as the submitter, does he, when he is reviewing it as the department head, does he have to switch between agenda and Unity? The answer is no. He can do all of that in agenda if that's what he would like to do. I know there's just different preferences. Basically, Unity just gives you another way to do the same approval or the same workflow review that you can do in agenda.
I just wanted to ask what workflow history might be.
Oh, yes. Okay, so a great thing to point out is this workflow history. So once you go into OnBase Unity and then click on the workflow in the ribbon and you open an item, down here, this is where your supporting documents window is, and then just next to it is this workflow history. And so when you open this, this will give you kind of some status updates throughout the process. When various users had the item, when they reviewed it, when it was sent to legal, and so on. And then there's also history where this is a little more minute down to this, say the presenter was updated. It will kind of document all of those minute changes in the history. But workflow history is probably more useful when you're wondering, oh, who was the last user to have this? Has it been to legal already, or is that still waiting to come? So John is asking, can the originator see that workflow history? Yes. That typically appears once the item, does it appear before they send to the first person, or? So you have to save the item, but then that feature becomes available. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, Gary? Why are there two? Okay, so Unity is more of a program for, Amanda, how would you describe Unity?
It's our document central, and it's used by other departments. So, for example, it's used by police, it's used by redevelopment. Community development stores all of their documents in a program called CityView, but it actually integrates with OnBase and pulls documents from OnBase. So it's really our city's main document repository that has the ability to allow you to do these other functions.
Yeah, so basically, you can kind of think of Unity like some of the uses of Sire now, where when you go into Sire, you can go to the documents and view all the different document categories that are available to you as a user. So that's something that the council uses, but as Amanda mentioned, it's used by many other departments just for document storage and document management. So it just gives you another way of doing the same thing. So Gary's wondering if it's irrelevant which one you use. So if you are doing a review of a document or a review of an agenda item, you can use either. If someone is submitting an agenda item, that can only be done in OnBase agenda. So there's the difference. The item has to be created in agenda, but once it's created in agenda, you can use either program to do a review and to continue that through the workflow. Does that answer your question? Any other questions or clarifications? Okay. So that is basically how it works for Unity. So the options for the agenda item tasks are identical for that user, whichever program you're in. So then something that's a little different for the legal reviewer step. As I mentioned earlier, every department, Amanda, do you want to pull up that chart? So we have just a chart here. So this is the chart we referenced earlier with mid-level reviewers, but also over here we have the legal department and which user in legal coordinates with each individual department. So the way that the workflow is built is so that, anyone in Parks and Recreation, all of their items will go to Gary Millward. Anyone in the police department, their documents will go to Steve Schreiner. So the way that the workflow is configured is that it will go to that specific user. If there is a change in who in legal is working with your department, please let us know so that we can update the workflow accordingly and keep things working smoothly. So that's really the only step where we have that kind of configuration. The system name for it is load balancing. You won't ever really need to do anything with that, but in case you're curious about how that works. It basically allows for items going all to the same department to be funneled to specific users based on their work settings. Okay, Amanda, do you want to go back into Unity and we'll just demonstrate that legal step? Okay, so Amanda is logging in as Gary Millward, or test Gary Millward. We had test users for all the departments and council staff. We tested all of your workflows to make sure they worked as expected with all of test users at every step. So that way we weren't using your username to do anything untoward. Okay, so again, you'll open OnBase Unity and then click on Workflow. And you can configure your layout and configure your default homepage. And then here you'll see that, so this is a great example. So Gary Millward, he has maybe several roles. He could submit an item for legal. He could also be added as an additional reviewer for another department. And he is one of the users in the legal review step. So you can see over here where he has several different queues showing up. And next to the queue, there's a parenthetical notation indicating that there's one item in his legal review queue. So when he opens that item, again, it'll be the same functionality for viewing an agenda item, and then there are these workflow tasks or agenda item tasks at the top. So the next step is that from legal, the item, unless you could send it back to a previous step or to an additional reviewer, but assuming that everything with that is approved by legal, then it goes on to the mayor's office. And so Wayne reviews those items. And so the process for reviewing those is identical. And then after the mayor's office, the last step in the workflow is the council office.
Every council agenda item goes through legal and finance.
So Chief Miguel asked if every item agenda that's going to council goes through finance and legal, and that, yes, that is correct. So there may be items that may not have any financial implications, and so in those cases, legal or finance would just take a look at it, see if there are any financial impacts that they need to consult on, and then send it on to the next step.
That happens today in Sire.
Dan just mentioned that happens today in Sire. So, okay, so Amanda has opened the mayor review step, and then, oh yeah, she's just showing side by side the different options. So here on the right, we have agenda, and then here on the left is Unity. And then once you open the agenda item in Unity, it looks very similar. Oh, you can't open it? Oh, okay. So Amanda... Okay. Amanda made a good point. So the Unity version, you cannot... You're just viewing the agenda item, not the documents that are attached to it. So that may be a good point to clarify. For departments that are reviewing the attachments, agenda will be your best bet for reviewing those agenda items. Okay, and then the last step, you'll see here, they can send it on to the council office, and then our staff will be notified that an agenda item is ready for our review. Brian?
Just council staff can see them.
So most users here will use agenda, but we wanted you to understand that if you use Unity,
Okay, so Amanda was just making a clarification. For most users, you'll have the most functionality by using Agenda, but you can approve items in Unity. Okay, so Amanda has logged in as a council office user. Bryce, or yeah, Bryce is probably a good one. Okay, and so once an item comes to the council office, we'll go in here to workflow. And then Amanda, do you want to click on that arrow to expand? Oh, I guess it's down here. So there's one item for agenda item review. And then there are a few more options for council staff. So we can send it back basically to most any step in the process. And then we can mark an item as approved or cancel the workflow. So that is basically the gist of how all of you will be using OnBase. I guess kind of after seeing everything in its entirety, do you have any questions at this point, Cliff?
Before you showed us 3 on-base apps, Agenda, Minutes, and Unity. How does the Minutes fit into that?
Okay, so Cliff was just asking, back in the Portal Manager, there were 3 OnBase programs, OnBase Agenda, OnBase Unity, and OnBase Minutes, and he was asking how Minutes fits into it. Basically, Amanda and I will really be the only users of the Minutes client. That's for taking the minutes during a council meeting. And so really no one else will use that. Unless you want to, because then the minutes, it syncs with the agenda program so that completed minutes are available in the agenda program.
And how is it going to be made available? Like right now, a typical person can go in and go to Sire.
Yeah, we'll have, so Cliff's asking how can some of those materials be made available to the public. We have some sites that will take the place of the current Sire public access, which is publicdocuments.provo.org. So it will basically be a similar functionality where members of the general public can go online and view council agendas and other materials related to council meetings. So it'll be really similar. Right now we have all of the links to those pages on our council agendas and in the notification emails I send out. So we'll be updating those with the new versions and doing some messaging, working with Karen to share about that so that users know where to go.
I think you mentioned before, and now I've forgotten when we were doing earlier testing, the old documents and everything that are in Sire, what happens to those and how does the public access those?
Okay, so Amanda's trying to show us right now, but these sites aren't live yet, so the links don't all work. But we've been working on security testing with IS, and so, oh, Josh will explain to it. Let me turn the mic over to him.
So for those of you who don't know, Sire was actually acquired by OnBase. So if you want to consider OnBase to be the upgrade from Sire, that's really what it is. And it is part of the Provo 360 project we've been working on. So all of the documents will eventually be in OnBase, and all the tools that Sire had will have a new form of that in this version of the product. And we will be on OnBase for the foreseeable future for those functionalities. So your documents that were out there should be being migrated as part of the project. Okay.
Yeah, John?
So we're going live on the November 13th council meeting. Is there a plan when we start up the system that we're going to have email notifications working, or is something going to be delayed? Or?
Yeah, so what we did is while we were doing testing with all of your fake usernames, we turned off the email notifications so we weren't spamming you with hundreds of emails about fake agenda items that were nonsense, basically. So Amanda and I have been working, I've been working on configuring what those default notification messages will say so that, because the system messages are a little not quite what we want, so we're just working on updating those. And the idea is that those will be ready to go live as soon as we're going live with OnBase.
Is there a date?
There's a date. So November 2nd is the date. It's a Friday, so that's when our IS department will be working on, and our OnBase partners will be working on the conversion of everything from council-related from Sire to OnBase. So it's basically November 5th is when all of you as end users will have access to OnBase Agenda.
So we can go install it.
You can go install it. Just leave it alone. Don't do anything quite yet, because we still need to go in and create all of the council meeting dates and meeting types and do that. But you can feel free to try downloading it and installing it, because that way we'd love to help you work through any issues with that well in advance of when you'll actually need to start using it. Okay. Yeah, and Josh says if there's an issue, just to submit a support ticket. And Camille.
You indicated that council staff could cancel workflow. Under what circumstances or what would that describe?
Yeah, so Camille was asking about the cancel workflow option that is available to council staff. So I'm trying to remember exactly, because
Basically, you can cancel it for any reason you see fit, at any point in the process. It wouldn't delete the item or stop the item, it would just prevent it from going further in the workflow. So maybe something went to planning commission, and we were anticipating having it on the agenda, but we need more information, so we want to hold off. So she might cancel the workflow in that case, but leave the agenda item.
It's also getting approved, correct? Like, we're not approving it.
So Josh was saying so the cancel workflow basically is a feature that we can use as council staff. So say we know that there's an item that basically was intended to come to council, but then maybe the proposal was withdrawn or the plans changed or something, and so we know that that item is no longer coming, and so maybe it doesn't need the mayor to review it, it doesn't need legal to review it, so we can go in as council staff and cancel the workflow. We can go in at any point and do that if it's necessary. So if you realize, oh, we submitted this item and it's a total mistake, just let us know and we can help you get rid of it. Chief Miguel?
So nobody knows who else is submitting items, so I'm assuming that will be used also for crowd control, for council meetings.
Yes, so
Go through that, and if there's 20 items, 3 of which are gonna take an hour apiece, you guys will make decisions about what goes forward and what gets pushed.
exactly, and that's not, so Chief Miguel was asking if that's kind of how the council staff will kind of be gatekeepers to what is getting onto a council agenda. And that's, so the cancel workflow is more for kind of stopping the process of it, sending it to each consecutive user in the workflow process. There are some other tools that we'll kind of review in more detail with just council staff, since it's not applicable to other users on how to kind of manage those agendas. The target meeting date is really where that will be big, and so that's where it's really helpful if you have to have a target meeting date for the item to save, so be sure to have a target meeting date, and then if you have the anticipated duration of your item, that's really helpful to us as well, because that kind of helps us with our scheduling and planning of those agendas. John?
Related to that, is there going to be kind of a notification to the originator or the department head that just says this officially been scheduled on this date?
So that's a great question. So John was asking if there's any kind of official notification that an item has been scheduled for this date. So in the current system, there is not a notification to that specificity because of the target meeting date function. So what you do receive is an email notification once the council office has approved your agenda item. And then what you can do is, Amanda, will you go to the agenda item search? And that's that's only for published agendas, correct? Okay, so you can go to the public website. That will be if an agenda has been published, but often you might need to know before we're ready to publish. So what you can see is these items here. So this is the item that Amanda submitted for Kari. So you can see the status of those items. One's in the mayor review queue, one's been approved. The meeting name, it's still showing that it is to be assigned. So that means that Kari entered in the target meeting date as expected, but council staff have not yet put it onto an assigned meeting. By comparison, If, Amanda, and so Amanda's just showing how council staff will go in, here are some agenda items that we can view that are associated with this specific meeting date, and then council staff can drag it over to the meeting. Okay, and if we look down here at the agenda item search, you'll see this is the item Amanda just had open that Kari entered, and Amanda has since assigned it to a meeting, so it's showing the meeting name and the meeting time. So that's the best way to tell when it's been assigned to a meeting, but you will get a notification saying that it's been approved. And so then at that point, you can go in and check the status. If it's not been assigned yet, then you can contact the council office if you'd like a better idea, or you can check back.
We didn't have it in Sire, but long term, if they're looking at enhancements in the system, that would be a really nice.
Yeah, and so John was mentioning that would be a great enhancement. We agree. I think I was interested in whether or not that was a function, and at this point, no, but we're definitely interested in exploring that if that becomes something we could add. Okay, Jimmy, and then Renee.
Is this the best way to see all the items on unpublished agenda date?
Yes. Okay, yeah, Amanda makes a good point. So certain users, Amanda right now is logged in as manager, which is kind of our, what Amanda and I have been using and doing a lot of the configuration. So as manager, Amanda can see all of these items, but users in a specific department will typically only be able to see items pertaining to their department. So that's another benefit and another reason we strongly urge you to enter the agenda items. Have your agenda items entered by your staff. If you call the council office and ask us to enter your item, and we do so, you won't be able to track it in the same way that you can if you initiate the workflow from the beginning. And then Renee had a question, and then I'll go to Scott. That's a great question. So Renee asked if there's an out of office. So it doesn't work exactly like it does in Sire, but you can contact Amanda or I, and we can configure. It's just something we need to adjust in the user groups, and so we can basically, if you have indicated I will be on vacation and this user will be covering for me, we can activate that user as part of the appropriate user group to be able to do that, assuming that they have the right status or position to be approving what they would be approving for you. Correct, yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. It's great to have your supporting users set up so that it's just an easy switch when there's those instances of vacation coverage. Another question from Renee. Okay, so can you access this from the web? So that's what Amanda and I mentioned. So there's OnBase Agenda, OnBase Unity, and then there is a web client for Agenda. And so that could be a great alternative. Do we know if that is visible outside the city's network? Okay, it's only visible through the city's network, so you would likely have to use a VPN connection or something in order to be able to access that. That's like another great alternative.
If you went through book.provo.org, you could go to the home version of it. That just takes you to an internal browser, which then you can access any web-based.
Okay, so that's a great point. So if you know that you'll be on vacation and you prefer to have that control over those items, you can use the remote.provo.org to access that web version of OnBase Agenda. And then Scott had a question, and then Dan Follett.
So when the council generates
That's a great question. So Scott is asking if, say, the council has a presentation where they want to invite a department to speak or present on an item, and is there any way that the department is notified other than us contacting them? So internally in the system, so the council office, we have the ability to add an agenda item and to bypass the workflow. So that way, like, say Cliff is ready to submit an item, because it ends at Cliff, it doesn't need to go through every step of the process. We'll still work with legal on review of those, but that's kind of how we would handle those items. And then we would probably have some kind of on-base communication coordinating that. So that might be the case where maybe we have a report from a commission or board that's under the purview of a city department, but they aren't entering their own agenda item. So we'll coordinate with you on that. Brian? Yeah, so Brian mentioned could you use the additional reviewer function to notify some of those users? And yes, that's a great point. Is the additional reviewer available when you bypass workflow? I don't think it is. Yeah, so that's the thing, when it's the council office creating an item, the additional reviewer capability is limited somewhat by us bypassing the workflow, because that's kind of a component of the workflow. So, but if you ever have questions about those kinds of situations, we try to be communicative, and we're happy to field questions and help facilitate what needs to happen, since we know sometimes we encounter those situations where it's a little unusual or varies from the norm. And then, Dan, did you still have a question?
I think mine got answered.
Okay.
Same as Renee's follow-up in terms of whether or not we can approve the
Okay, great. And then, John.
I assume similar to Sky right now, we'll be able to go in and if we want to just electronically pull up an agenda coming up next week or
So that's a great question. So John asked whether, Amanda, do you want to log in as one of, like, Kari, and we can show them what the meeting view is? Yes, so Cliff asked if we are recording this training. This will be made available on Channel 17 YouTube, and then we will post a link on the Employee Insider. This has been updated to have I think it's the next banner. Here we go. So here is, if you click on this link, it takes you to the Provo 360 training page, and if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a section for OnBase. And so the last few items here, these are all the things that we've covered today. And document disposition is our final section. You can navigate to that manually if you're at home.provo.org by clicking Initiatives and then Provo 360 Training. So we've tried to make it easy to find with other Provo 360 materials, but I'm also planning to send out a follow-up email to the initial group that was invited to this training. We'll send you digital files of these documents as well as a link to those pages and information about where agendas will be available online if you have residents or citizens asking about those or other staff members. Okay, well, if I don't want to curtail any other questions, but if there are no other questions, then we will excuse most of you except for Council and Mayor's Office and Brian for our last step. Thank you again for coming and for taking the time. This has been really helpful to go through it with all of you. Okay, so we have our IS support. Thank you for sticking around. And then our council office staff, mayor's office staff, myself, Amanda, and Brian Jones. So this last part of the training, let me just give these to anyone that I missed. So this last part of the training covers OnBase agenda document disposition. So this is the process that takes place following a council meeting with any ordinances or resolutions that have been approved by the council. So the main users that this involves are myself, the policy analysts, Brian, the council chair or the redevelopment agency board chair, the mayor, Tracy or Emily, and Amanda. So we have we run this through minutes already? Okay, so we have an item that we've already prepared. Amanda just went into our meeting here. This part of the process really is something I'll do, so we're just kind of gonna skim through this to what is relevant to all of you. So the system, there are a few things that I'll go in and do to just indicate that an item was approved, or if it was not approved, we do nothing. And so then it functions similar to the agenda item review, where there is, rather than agenda item tasks, there are meeting tasks. And so then I will start the disposition workflow, which then kicks off this whole process. So this handout is structured much like the other. There's kind of an overview of all of the steps in the process and how those interact, and then we kind of go through each step. So we've just briefly gone through the item preparation step, and so then Amanda is going to open up the Unity client. So this is really where this part of the process has to be done in Unity because it pertains to the documents which are going through the workflow. So in this case, it's the ordinance or resolution that has been approved. Okay, so once the council executive assistant has started the document disposition workflow, then I will go into OnBase Unity, and over here there's this agenda document disposition queue, and then these are all queues pertaining to me as a user. So this item preparation queue is showing the documents, the resolutions that have been approved. And we put really outlandish years and dates on these and content on them so that we knew they were fake, since we'll be demonstrating signature features and whatnot. Okay, so then when I go in, I'll have these options to send to the policy analyst to review, send to legal to review, or to cancel the workflow. Cancel workflow, I would probably really only do that if an item somehow was entered into the workflow by mistake, or there's a couple scenarios like our landmarks commission items. The county, to record those with the county, they typically like having the wet stamp and seal of the city rather than digital versions, and so that's a case where I might kind of send it through some of the workflows, but then cancel the item before we do signatures. And we'll do a paper copy. But those are basically the options there. So Amanda will click send to legal review. And something that is helpful, so in Sire right now, you have the option typically to complete an action on the item and then go to the next item in the process. This Unity client has that option, but it's something that you have to set, so it doesn't automatically, because I was running into where you can see your items in your queue here, and once you do an action on the first item, it doesn't automatically load the next item. I can't remember where I found that. Amanda, try right-clicking the item down here. Okay, so what you can do is, okay, I can't remember how I did that, but if you want to use that feature, It's either it might be in tasks here, or it might be, I'll have to experiment with that again and figure out how I did that, but basically that is an option. So we can just go ahead and send it to PA review. Okay. So Amanda will just demonstrate one. Okay, so now Amanda's logging in as one of the policy analysts. So basically the next few steps of the workflow are pretty similar in that the user will log in. You'll have these queues configured over here. An item might not show up immediately, so if that happens, you can use this refresh button here. And then the policy analyst, they may realize, oh, this vote is wrong, or this item actually, this edit occurred in the ordinance and it didn't make it to this version. So the policy analyst might make any slight corrections necessary, and then they can choose if they want, they can add a comment about what they've done, and then they can send it on to legal, or they can return it to the item preparation step. So now Amanda is logging out and logging in as Brian. Yes, so this part of the process has to be done in Unity because it applies to the document, not the agenda item itself. It is. Amanda will show us. And I think you have to download the document rather than opening it in the viewer within the program. Okay, so then Brian performs his review. He can return the item to item preparation or approve it. And one thing to note here, the way that those buttons, the order that they appear in, you can configure to your own user preferences. So say that you'd rather have the approve button first in the sequence. You can, I think you just have to click this arrow, and then you can change where they are and click OK. I think you have to click OK for the changes to stick. Yes, so this has some of the same functionality. Amanda, do you want to open this and show making revisions to a document? You can change the date. Yeah, so right in the viewer here. So Amanda just made that change. She can enter a comment about what the revision was. And then it will show the latest revision, which just happened. And then it'll show those same details. Okay, so once Brian has reviewed the item, if it's ready to approve, he'll hit approve. If not, he can return to item preparation. And then the next step is the council chair. So the way that the workflow is configured is that the item, depending on whether it's an RDA resolution or if it's a council item, it will route to the appropriate chair. And so then they'll log in and they will approve an item. And the options that they have are to return to legal review, return to item preparation, or approve for signatures. And again, they can rearrange the order of that. And then if they approve for signatures, then the next step, and Tracy, we can work with you and Emily to set up the signatures in the program, so we can set up a time to do that. Oh, it's already done. Amanda already has it on file. Okay, so the signatures should already be configured, but if they're not, or if we have a new council chair, then those are things that will just be updated at that point. So then the item signature, it goes to me in the council office or to the mayor assistant here. We need to go to me first. So then I'll go in and add the appropriate signature for the council chair or the RDA chair. And then we'll also demonstrate how to add the date. Correct. So yeah, after I enter it, it goes to the mayor, and then it goes to the mayor assistant, and then it goes to the city recorder. So that's a great idea. It records the date that it goes to the mayor, yes, because I presume we would need to know that for knowing the effective date. Yeah. Cliff?
Of course, we hope it doesn't happen very often from the mayor and council's office, but it's not. Other than to just stop the process and send us a letter.
We could add that, a veto option. Right, forwarding without signature is not the same thing.
Well, by statute, it's supposed to be returned to the council with a memo documenting the reasons for the veto.
One thing I'm wondering, Amanda, if they need to include a memo, there's not really a way they can upload another document, correct?
Just like when you create the staff report, you could just have a box that allows.
Well, I'm just.
What she would actually do is she would right click on the document and she would send it to document separation.
Do we need to give her permissions for that? We would need to, Amanda and I will experiment. We will come up with some options for how the process could work, and we will revisit with the appropriate parties.
Then, I don't know how, this isn't smart to do this, but technically that also triggers it going back into the agenda item workflow, because it's supposed to go back to the next council meeting for the council to.
So what we could set it up so that when the mayor vetoes something, it goes back to the item preparation step. Maybe could we add a queue for vetoed item, and then we could initiate the process from within the council office of putting it on an agenda and tackling that end of the process. Yeah, so we'll work on that, and we'll work with Brian on any legal questions we have about the process, and we'll bring some solutions. So the solar. Okay, and this is configured so that the mayor can forward something without a signature, but we'll work on the veto solution so that we have something elegant in place if and when we need it.
Without signature, under statute, if 15 days go by, it should automatically be forwarded without signature. And I don't know if that's part of the workflow or not.
Okay, yeah, so Brian, I'm just saying this for the sake of the recording. The statute requires that if an item is not signed by the mayor within 15 days, it's automatically forwarded without a signature. So Amanda and I will also add that to our list of things to figure out how to configure. Okay, so the chair is ready to, well, the chair has sent it to the council office executive assistant. And so then in here, so we started in the workflow tab and went to apply signatures. And then we went over here to this signatures view. And then there are some options here. It probably should be. And Tracy, we can, if you'd like some more specific instructions on the signature pad, we can prepare something for you for that. And then the way to add the date is under markups, and then there's this text box feature, and you can insert that. And then once you save an item under markups, once you save the item, then it becomes a revision, essentially, but the signature has been applied and the date has been applied, and so the most recent revision will include both of those items, and they're essentially permanent. Because this is a PDF, even though the title indicates otherwise. Oh, it's not a PDF yet? Okay, it's a TIFF, so it's an image for us to be able to add the signatures. Okay, so then the next step is that is sent to the mayor, or it can be returned to item prep.
The reason why you've got a text box to type.
Correct. So sometimes Gary will come in, or he'll approve something and I am out of the office, or it's over a long weekend. So if he approves it on Friday and I'm applying the signatures the following Monday, I put the date that he approved the item as the date that his signature has been applied. Okay, so then in the mayor's queue, and Amanda, do you want to try the refresh button right here? We tried.
We can put a signature byline underneath to show the date that she applied the signature,
Right.
but unless he's the one doing it,
There wasn't a way to automate that part of
it
it.
does show in history. Which is similar to Sire, we can
Okay, we are locating our item. But essentially, the mayor has similar options. As of right now, they are return to item preparation, approve with signature, forward without signature, and then we're exploring the veto, and the automated 15 days have passed and it has not been signed. Okay, so for the sake of demonstration, we'll demonstrate the forward without signature just so we can kind of see what that does. So we have configured that to just forward directly to Amanda and skip the mayor assistant step. If it's forwarded with approved with signature, then it will go to the mayor assistant step. And then once it comes to Amanda, she'll apply her signature and do the city seal. And so Amanda's adding a text box, the mayor opted not to sign, forwarded without signature.
Does that just, I mean, forwarded without signature could mean that it accidentally got forwarded without signature as opposed to she chose not to sign? I mean, I don't know if that's confusing or.
If you know that that happens, you can call Amanda and she can return it to.
I just wonder for, purpose, keeping it, is that confusing at all to say forwarded?
That's a good question.
Is there something in code that specifies what it says?
I mean, the
And I think why we've added the text is that occasionally, like, something's gone through, but it was supposed to have been, like, the mayor had intended to sign it, and so just due to eliminate that margin of error, I think that's where that
In the
came
rare
from.
instance
But
of a veto, do you put veto where the mayor's signature goes?
this is just where it would come back to me, and it would come back to a council meeting. So it wouldn't even get to the point of being finalized.
Since we've never done it inside, I don't know, I mean, in essence, we
Okay, so now this is still in the recorder step. So then once Amanda does what she needs to do, she will send it to item finalization, and then it will send it back to me. And then that's basically where I reindex the file as the appropriate resolution, RDA resolution, or ordinance, and then it becomes part of our OnBase repository. And it just got converted from a TIFF to a PDF.
Elizabeth, what about stuff where, we've had instances before where we've been waiting on exhibits?
Yeah, so that's where it kind of just stays with me for a while. And so we're still figuring out the best way to do that, whether I should leave things in my queue or, so I think we're kind of handling that like we are now. So I have a spreadsheet where I track any of the supporting exhibits or contracts that need to be executed, or the zone map changes, whether they've been implemented, and those kinds of things. So I think typically what my intent is to treat this as like once it gets to me, I'll finalize the item, and so that way any legislative changes go into effect, but I will still go back and update the final version once we have the executed exhibits or other supporting documentation.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, from my perspective, I think it's better if it goes to the mayor right away. Rather than
Right.
waiting for-
Yeah, so that's why with Sire, we've had some issues in the past where things get assigned the wrong document type or whatever it is. And so that's why we kind of changed the way that this part of the workflow worked, so that I am the one re-indexing the documents and storing them in the cabinet so that we can make sure they're cataloged properly and that any exhibits are switched out. But I'll go ahead and do that, and then things that I'm waiting on, I'll follow up kind of with my manual tracking process. And if there were a better way to do it in this system, we would like to explore that. But at this point, there hasn't been a great solution in the software. So that essentially concludes our document disposition training. Does anyone have any questions in addition to?
So I don't know that needs to be for the whole group. I mean, I can talk to you offline if you want to be part of the group. I actually have questions back on the agenda management process about the council office approval stuff.
Okay.
And how I can
Yeah, and that might be a good conversation for council staff and Amanda. And we don't need to make it part of this training, but I think we have some things that we still need to do some training on with our council staff, and so we'd love to have you join us for that, since some of it is, so we've tried to replicate our workflow fairly closely from Sire, but there are some functions and features in Sire that are not user-friendly and don't do what we need them to do. So we've been trying to make improvements and streamline where appropriate, but there are still some kind of procedural questions that we'll want to discuss. So, okay, thank you all for sticking around for the long haul. Feel free to take some veggies on your way out.